Hello everyone. So today we're going to be discussing the diencephalon. For my half of the discussion, it's going to be about your thalamus, epithalamus, and then subthalamus. So first, let's describe the diencephalon. So it is the central core of brain tissue just above the midbrain. So this is your midbrain, pons, and medulla, which is your brainstem. Just above it will be your diencephalon, which is this one in green, and above it or around it, surrounding it, are your cerebral hemispheres or is your cerebrum. So your diencephalon contains numerous nuclei. So nuclei are just a collection of neurons or nerves, and it contains both sensory and motor. So this means that the main role the diencephalon plays in the scheme of the CNS is to relay impulses. It's either from the spinal cord upwards towards the diencephalon, and the diencephalon passes it to your cerebrum, or it could be from the cerebrum and the signal passes through your diencephalon before it gets sent downwards to your spinal cord. Okay? So, mapa-afferent, pasaka, para ma-interpret sa brain, or from the brain, mapapanaog to carry out motor signals, it will pass through your diencephalon. Okay, so the diencephalon consists of your thalamus, subthalamus, epithalamus, and your hypothalamus. First, let's go with the bigger structure. So you have here your thalamus. So it is a paired oval or ovoid structure buried deep within your cerebrum. So it consists about 80% of the diencephalon. And it is located, as I've said, just above the midbrain. Okay, so oval masses of gray matter with sparse tracts of white matter. So ano ni ang gray matter and white matters of our CNS and PNS? So when you see gray matter, those are just actually the parts of the neuron na wala myelin sheath. And those that are white, those are the ones that are covered with the myelin sheath. Okay, so what else? Again, the function of the thalamus is that it is the main or principal relay station. Siya tagapasa ng signal, traffic control sa mga impulses going up to the brain or from the brain going down to the spinal cord. So for the parts of your thalamus, you have here your interthalamic adhesion. So diba, your thalamus is paired. You have one on the right and one on the left, and it is ovoid in structure. There's something that connects those two sides, and it is called your interthalamic adhesion. Next, you have within each half or each side of the thalamus, your intermedullary lamina. Okay, so each one has this Y-shaped mass of white matter, which divides, as I've said, each half of the thalamus. Okay? Main function, relay, and consciousness. Now let's talk about the different nuclei of your thalamus. So, diba, you've seen those ovoid masses, right, in the picture, and you see your interthalamic, your intermedullary lamina at the middle, diba, divide niya siya. So, what was it dividing? It's actually one way of bordering the different nuclei of your thalamus. Okay, this is how it is able to carry out different functions. So you have 7 major thalamic nuclei. Let's start with the first one, your anterior nucleus. So your anterior nucleus receives input from the hypothalamus and sends it out to the limbic system. So that is why its function lies in emotions and memory, because it again has connections to your hypothalamus, and then from there it sends the impulse to your limbic system. Next nuclei you have is your medial nuclei. So this one naman niya receives input from the limbic system and basal ganglia and sends it to the cerebral cortex, which is why they have functions in emotions, learning, memory, and cognition. Okay, so let's write that down so you don't forget. So letter F stands for from, and this is to. So again, your anterior nucleus receives input from your hypothalamus and sends it towards your limbic system. For your medial nuclei, it receives input from your limbic system this time and from your basal ganglia or basal nuclei, and it sends it to your cerebrum. Let's just put CR. Next, you have your lateral group. So the lateral group is composed of your lateral dorsal nucleus, lateral posterior nucleus, and your pulvinar nucleus. So this takes in signals or input coming from your superior colliculi and from your limbic system, and it sends it again towards your cerebrum. So, see, lateral dorsal is for expression of emotions, while both the lateral posterior and pulvinar nucleus are for integration of sensory information. Okay, now let's proceed to the next one. You have your ventral group consisting of 5 different nuclei. So you have here your ventral anterior and your ventral lateral nucleus. So these ones receive input from your basal nuclei. So basal nuclei, by the way, is another name for your basal ganglia. Those can be interchanged. And it sends it towards your cerebrum. Okay, which is why it functions mainly for movement control and somatic sensations. While the other nuclei is your ventral posterior nucleus, which is able to relay functions regarding sensation of temperature, pain, and proprioception. Next, you have the remaining 2 nuclei for your ventral group. You have your lateral geniculate nucleus and your medial geniculate nucleus. For your lateral geniculate nucleus, it receives input since it is for eyesight. So it comes from the eyes and the output goes to the cerebrum to interpret eyesight. So si medial geniculate, since it's for hearing, so the input comes from your ear, from your ear, and then it sends it to your cerebrum to interpret the sensation of hearing. Next, you have your interlaminar nuclei for arousal and consciousness, your midline nucleus for memory and olfaction, and your reticular nucleus for monitoring, filtering, and integrating activity of the other thalamic nuclei. So, kumbaga, out of the 7, your reticular nucleus is the manager of the group. For the intralaminar nucleus, while its connections are very widespread, so you don't need to memorize that, just know that it has connections with the limbic system and thus its function is related to that. And your midline nucleus, so it's the same thing. And for your reticular nucleus, so this lies closer to your thalamus next to your internal capsule. Okay, so this is how it is situated inside your brain structure. So outside here, externally is your cerebrum. Inside, you have your thalamus. So you have one on each side, both of which lay on top of your midbrain. If you take it apart, you have your several nuclei. You have 7 major groups, remember that one. And as you can see here, each nuclei has a different function, to be specific. But in general, they are just relay centers. So sila taga-pasa, taga-direct some traffic of the signals all going up to your cerebrum. So it accepts and sorts the signal according to where it needs to go to get interpreted. Okay. Now let's proceed to your epithalamus. So your epithalamus is located superior and posterior to your thalamus. So it's this structure here above and then this structure here behind your thalamus. It consists of the pineal gland and your habenular nuclei. So your pineal gland is actually part of your endocrine system because it is able to secrete the hormone melatonin, which is for regulating sleepiness, your circadian rhythm, or your sleep-wake cycle, and as well as it acts as an antioxidant. So your pineal gland releases melatonin depending on the stimulus of light being perceived by the eyes. Which is why, kung aga, there is lesser melatonin released by the pineal gland and therefore you feel less sleepy, if not at all sleepy, diba? But once it is dark, it is nighttime, then your pineal gland releases a lot of melatonin, which explains why you become sleepy in darker rooms during the night and in similar situations wherein there is no light. Next, you have your habenular nuclei, which is for emotional responses to olfaction. So what does this mean? Ang function ni habenular nuclei links smells and certain scents with certain memories, which is why even if you just smell something vaguely from your childhood, you'd remember a certain memory. Next, you have your subthalamus. So it is located between your thalamus and your midbrain and consists of your subthalamic nucleus, zona incerta, and parts of your extrapyramidal motor system. So this is also considered to be the motor zone of the diencephalon. So ang iyang contribution is with regards to your movement. Okay, so we're going to relate this later on when we talk about the basal ganglia in your midterms, I think. And that is it for our discussion. Super short. Thank you for listening and God bless.